Okay, hi everybody. I'm Kelsay from the Kelsay and Connor Show. And I'm so excited to be here today to be talking about my birth story, which it did not go as planned, even close to what I wanted. And honestly, like, I'm not even mad about it. It's totally okay. But it was really, it was kind of a scary thing. So, I'll kind of give you a bit of a backstory. I started doing a lot of mental preparation. I usually suffer from a lot of anxiety, overthinking and worried about the outcome. And yeah, you know what anxiety is. So I started doing a lot of mental preparation really early on in my pregnancy. I read a couple books called, one of them called Hypnobirthing, which I religiously stuck to having Connor read me the script at night. I bought meditations. I was really, really dedicated to manifesting the birth experience that I wanted, which was to be unmedicated. I originally wanted a home birth. I wanted it to be as like zero medical intervention as humanly possible. And I think it's just because I was really afraid of the medical system. Like I'm a nurse, right? I work on the cardiac unit. Like I see that, we use a lot of pharmaceuticals to treat our patients. And in the past, when I read this other book called The Rites of Passage, something like that, I'll put it in the show notes, but it talks a lot about how, not even 50 years ago, they would put women completely under general anesthesia and remove the baby via forceps or vacuum, and just how traumatic it was for the baby to enter the world that way. And I just knew from the beginning that that is not how I wanted to let Olivia come into the world, and that's not the experience that I wanted to have. I wanted it to be very holistic. So I actually started out with a midwife whom I was going to hire for a birth at home. We ended up not using her. She just really wasn't in like alignment with what we wanted. We actually thought we were going to move back up to Salt Lake City from St. George, Utah. We didn't end up doing it, which now in hindsight I see was a total blessing, because that is the reason why we ended up not hiring her. So anyways, I wanted this really holistic, unmedicated, going inward birth. I started doing like oral ketamine therapy like maybe 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. And I was actually in the bathtub, and I had done a ketamine troche to help with my anxiety and just help me relax and go inward. And my maternal grandma, Becky, my grandma Becky, always comes to me whenever I really go inward. I don't know if we share parts of our souls or what that's about, but whenever I really, really go inward, she always comes to me. She passed away in 2008. And she came to me, and I didn't even know that I was pregnant at the time, but I was laying in the bathtub. I remember this so vividly. She came to me and told me that when I have a baby, it's going to be the most spiritual experience that I've ever had, and that it's going to put me so close to God, and that I have to do it natural. And so I was like, okay, cool, like mental note, store that away, right? So I find out I'm pregnant like 2 weeks later, and her due date is my grandma's birthday, July 29th. And I was just like, like, if that's not confirmation enough about like what I experienced in the bath, I don't know what is. So yeah, anyways, I wanted this nice holistic experience. Okay. So we go camping, the 4th of July weekend. So Thursday, July 4th this year, obviously Thursday, July 4th through Saturday, July 6th. And I was just like telling Connor and, our friends that we went with, I was like, you know what? She's gonna come on Tuesday or Wednesday, either the 9th, July 9th or July 10th. Like that's like, it's just gonna be great. Like, I don't wanna be pregnant anymore. Like, it's been 115 degrees down here. It's hot. Work is, I'm getting really slowed down at work. it's tough being, 36, 37 weeks pregnant and still working and being in that heat all the time. So I was like, jokingly, I was like, you know what, she's gonna come right at 37 weeks, because that was when I could go to the Simply Birth low intervention home birth suite at the St. George hospital here. Once you're 37 weeks, you are considered full term and you can go in and you can do an unmedicated birth. So I was like, she just needs to be 37 weeks and that's it. And so I joked about it, and Connor was like, no, like, I really don't think she's gonna come at 37 weeks. It's your first. We keep hearing that usually these pregnancies go longer. It's probably gonna be in August. And so I was like, nope, like, I'm manifesting it. And so we get back from our camping trip on Sunday. I was definitely like cramping, having some Braxton Hicks contractions over the weekend. But nothing crazy. And so we go in on Monday, July 8th, for my 37-week appointment. And that morning, I woke up and something or somebody came to me and told me that I needed to speak to God that day. And I didn't grow up religious. I've never read the Bible. Like, I'm not like and when I say God, I'm talking like the higher power, like the universe, my angels, my higher self, whatever you want to call it. I just say God because it's easier for me. And it feels like it resonates with me. So something told me that I needed to speak to God that morning. So I wrote in my journal, I just speak to God like I'm talking to a friend, and it's somebody that I can trust. And so I didn't know why, but I wrote to God in my journal that morning, and I felt so good. I felt so aligned with myself. Our baby appointment was at 1, and so I usually drink these little Crystal Lights. They have a little caffeine and a little boost, because if I don't drink one of those, usually I crash, or I have to take a nap, and I didn't want to crash this baby shower or this baby appointment. So we go to the baby appointment, and they take my blood pressure, and it's in the 140s over 90s. And this isn't completely unusual for me. From the get-go, even when I was seeing the midwife, when I was about anywhere from, I think I was like 6 to 12 weeks pregnant. I stopped seeing her when I was 12 weeks pregnant and switched over to the hospital at 14. Even then, I was having higher blood pressures, like in the 130s over 8, 130s over 90s, a couple 140s over 90s. I just thought it was white coat syndrome at the time. I bought a blood pressure cuff. I was taking them at home. They were 120s over 80s, sometimes 130s over 80s. And for those of you that aren't in the medical field, what you should know about the significance of the top and the bottom number in your blood pressure is your top number is your systolic. That's going to be the pressure in your veins, in your arteries, when your heart is contracting. So at the top of the squeeze of when your heart contracts, that's your systolic. Your diastolic, that bottom number, is going to be the pressure in your veins and your arteries when your heart is completely at rest. Okay, so in pregnancy, they really want to make sure that you're under 140 over 90. If you're over 140 over 90, that's when they start getting concerned about preeclampsia. And preeclampsia is a pregnancy-related condition that is characterized by high blood pressure, proteinuria, so having protein in your urine, and there's one other thing. I can't remember, but anyways, so I'm having kind of higher blood pressures every time I'm going in for all my appointments, but every time they would take it, they'd be like, let's wait a minute. They take it again, and it was 120 over 80 or 130 over 80, and it was okay. So we go into my 37-week appointment, and they're like, your blood pressure is in the 140s over 90s, and it's not coming down. And we're like, oh, well, it's probably the Crystal Light, right? Like shit, I shouldn't have been drinking that. Like, it's just the Crystal Light. There's no way that that's real. So they give me 10 minutes, and they go back and take it again, and it's in the 140s over 90s. So the doctor goes in and talks to maternal fetal medicine, which is the doctors who handle with complicated obstetrics, complicated pregnancies. And they want to admit me to labor and delivery for monitoring. And so we just kind of look at each other and we're like, okay. It's probably fine, but like we're just going with the flow. Okay, Connor works from home, so he can work from his phone. So we go upstairs and we sit in labor and delivery, and my blood pressures are sitting 140s over 90s, 150s over 90s. I even had one that was 161 over 101. Granted, that was like right after the doctor came in and was like, we're gonna induce you. And then he was like, let's take your blood pressure. I was like, no shit, that my blood pressure is high right after you just told me you were gonna induce me. But so yeah, I wasn't having any contractions. My blood pressure was just super high, and they took some blood work. And there's another pregnancy related complication called HELP syndrome. It stands for H, hypertension, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelets. And when they checked my blood work a couple of months ago, because I was worried about preeclampsia previously, my platelets were at 176,000, which is great. It's in a normal range. They checked my platelets at this appointment, and I was at 128,000. So my platelets had dropped over 50,000 platelets in 6 weeks. So they were pretty concerned about that. And so the doctor talks to maternal fetal medicine again, and he's like, yeah, like we need to induce you. And me and Connor were just like, whoa, like you're gonna induce me? First of all, like all the alarms are going off in my head, like this isn't what I wanted, this isn't what I planned for, like this medical intervention isn't something I want. We were gonna leave against medical advice. We weren't gonna stay. And so we sat there and we prayed about it, and ultimately decided to stay. They were concerned that if I went home and monitored my blood pressures, that I could get worse and worse and sicker. And the other thing is if your platelets are below 100,000, you cannot get an epidural. So that was another cause for concern for them. Because when you're induced, the medications they use to ripen your cervix and cause contractions artificially is incredibly painful and intense. So we decide to be induced, and they take us upstairs, and this is all starting on Monday, July 8th. And we get settled into our room. Connor goes and gets us dinner. They have me hooked up to the monitors. I've just lost my train of thought, sorry. Oh, and then around 9 o'clock that night, they put what's called Cervidil in. So this is a ribbon. It's about like this long, and it's medicated. It's called like Cervidil. And they put it up around your cervix to help your cervix start dilating and effacing, right? Because when you're in labor, what happens is like your cervix is sitting like this, and every time you contract, it does this, and it thins out and it spreads out, and then it gets to the point where it's so thin and so open that you can push your baby out. So I'm cramping pretty much like all night long. Like it's not terrible, but it's not fun. It feels like really intense period cramps. They're pumping me full of fluids. I'm getting up to pee what feels like every 2-3 hours. I didn't sleep well. And I'm just kind of like tired and painful when the doctors come in the morning around 9. The nurses check my cervix, and I'm not even to a 0.05 centimeters. I'm not even a 1. And I was telling Connor that morning, I was like, if I'm not, I feel like I'm at least a 5. Like there's no way that I'm contracting like this. There's no way that I'm cramping like this and I'm not dilating. And I was just like starting to get nervous. Like, if I'm not dilated, I don't think I can handle this pain. And I really, really, really didn't want to get an epidural, right? Because I wanted all unmedicated. And so yeah, they're like, you're at a 0.05. So they're like, yeah, okay, you're not even at a 1. And so I was like, just like, oh, okay, well, I want an epidural. Like this, like it was so intense. And when I talked to my doula about this, the way that she described it is natural birth is versus like being induced birth. The natural birth is so much more different in the way the contractions and the dilation goes, is because, right, like it's not being, your body isn't being forced to do something. It's like it's just happening naturally. So of course natural labor is still painful or, you know, intense, but being induced is something else. So at least that's what I've been told. So they put an epidural in, and that's really nice. And it works really well. Like I can't really move my legs. They have to put in a catheter, right? Because I can't fill my bladder. So I can't void my bladder on my own. And so the next thing that they do is they put me on Pitocin. And Pitocin is the artificial form of oxytocin. So oxytocin is a hormone or a chemical that your brain produces when you feel really good, when you're experiencing a lot of like feelings of love and happiness and joy. And it's so cute that oxytocin is that hormone, because that is the hormone that causes your uterus to contract and your cervix to dilate and for you to breastfeed, like to have letdown and lactate, right? So they put me on Pitocin. They put me on a pretty low dose, but I'm watching the monitor and I can see that my contractions are getting bigger and longer and more intense, which is good, right? That's what we want. So after a little bit of the Pitocin, they decide to check me again. So they check me again and I'm finally at a 1. Whoop-de freaking do, right? At this point, I've already been in labor for 15 hours. So they decided to do what's called a balloon pump. And if you've never, I didn't know what a balloon pump was, but they basically take a catheter, right? A catheter is like this long rubbery thing that they stick into your urethra to drain your bladder, okay? So at the end of where, like, so here's the insertion site of the catheter, right? It's got a hole in it so it can drain into the catheter bag. At the end of the insertion site, there is a balloon that expands, and they put normal saline in it, right? So obviously they want to make sure that this catheter is in your bladder all the way. They blow up the balloon and then it's not going to come out, right? Because if it just comes out, then what's the freaking point? So the balloon pump is when they basically take that catheter and they put the balloon part in your cervix and then blow it up to manually expand your cervix. Luckily, I didn't really feel it all that much because of the epidural, but they left that in for about 6 hours. It felt like a lot of pressure, but it wasn't too bad. So they left it in for about 6 hours. And then they also were upping the Pitocin. And right, the bigger the dose of the Pitocin, the stronger and more frequent my contractions are going to be. So let's see, it's probably about 6 p.m. on Tuesday, July 9th at this point. They take out the balloon catheter and they check me, and I'm at a 5 centimeter, which we were over the moon about. We thought that was totally great. Like, okay, great, we're halfway there. So they take the balloon pump out and they decide to break my water. And they know that once that your water is broken, that's really gonna get things moving. So the doctor comes in I think about 11 o'clock. They wanted to see how much more I would progress with just upping the Pitocin, which it wasn't very much. And so they come in, break my water. It didn't hurt at all. I had the epidural still, which it was wearing off, but I still had it. So they come in, break my water, just like this little like crochet looking thing, and they come in and break it. And then around 3 o'clock, I woke up in a lot of pain. My contractions, I was feeling all of them. The epidural had worn off. We called my doula, Sarah, and she came in, was helping doing acupressure, helping kind of like put hot cloths on, and she brought us snacks, and like I would highly recommend getting a doula if you can. So from about 3 a.m. until 9 a.m., I'm just like in excruciating pain. And there is so much pressure down there, so much pressure. Like it feels like I have to take the biggest, hardest poop of my life. Like that it's just sitting in my rectum and that I don't have the ability to push it out. And it's just so hard. And I'm so constant. Like that's what it feels like. And so we're turning me over and back and forth, and I'm getting on my knees and laying on the back of the bed. And I literally had to have Connor hold a hot pack to my butthole because it was hurting so bad. It was so intense. I remember I was literally like starting to panic. Like, oh my, like I need help. Like, please, someone come help me. Someone come help me. I need help. I need help. And I was crying, and I was asking for a C-section. I think I asked for a C-section 2 separate times. And thank God Sarah and Connor were like, no, you're not doing that. Like, we can do this. We got you. Like, you're going to be okay. So it's 9 a.m. Wednesday, July 10th. And I'm dilated to about a 7 or 8. Yeah, about a 7 or 8. Like we're getting really, really close. But I was like needing the anesthesiologist to come in and give me a bolus of medication. Like a bolus is like a big dose all at once. Because I was like, I can feel my legs. I can move my legs. Like something is wrong. Like this isn't working. So they give me a couple boluses, and those really help. And I'm pushing my button, but they wear off. Like it's not working. And that makes sense, right? You know, I've had this epidural for 2 days now. So the anesthesiologist comes in, and they're like, we want to put in a new epidural, and they want to put it higher up in my spine because they don't feel like it's working as well. So this new anesthesiologist comes in, puts in a new epidural, and that works really, really, really great. And so I'm like totally relaxed. I'm able to take a nap, which is awesome. I wake up, and the nurse is like, let's check you. And she's like, you're at about a 9, almost a 10. And so I just really wanted to start working on breathing my baby down. Like I really didn't want to push. I had done so much work to like prepare my pelvic floor. Like I'd done so many like Kegels and exercises and intentional breathing, and like I really didn't want to push down on my pelvic floor. So I got on my knees, and I was laying with my head facing toward the back of the bed. And I was just trying to breathe down and think about breathing my baby down into the birth canal every single time a contraction came. So I did that. I think we started pushing at like 1 o'clock, a little after 1. So we did that for about an hour or 2. It's hard to say. I feel like I pushed for 4 hours, 4 hours total. So after, I think it was about an hour of breathing the baby down, the nurse was like, "Hey, like, I need you to get on your back, and we actually need to like push because I don't think you're making much progress." And I wasn't about to argue with her. I was like, okay, like, let's try that. So we have me lay down, she checks me, and she's like, oh, like the baby is actually like moved down a lot more than I thought she would be. And so I was like, fuck yeah, that's great. So it worked. She's like, but we do need you to actually push, like bear down, flex your abs, like you are taking the biggest poop of your life. And so I do. And we push, and we push, and we push, and we push. It was wild. It was really, really crazy. I honestly feel like I don't even feel like it was 4 hours. I don't know how to describe it, but I just remember like pushing and pushing and pushing, like these contractions would come, and then I would just bear down and push so hard and just hold my breath and push so hard for 10 seconds, and then breathe, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again, and like do it 4 times with every contraction. And I remember she only wanted me to do it 3 times, but I'm like, no, like, let's get this done. Like, let's get this baby out. I'm ready to deliver. And so at the end, I'd be like, hey, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's go. And then I like bear down. So yeah, the doctor came in and I didn't want to watch the mirrors. But I could see in the reflection of his protection glasses, I could see her head. I could see the top of her head. And he was very encouraging. He was awesome. He was, everybody came in, they were setting up. They were all up in their isolation gear and stuff. And they were like, okay, push, push, push. And they were holding my legs and they were like pushing my legs against me. And I was bearing down like this. I'm just like reliving it in my head right now. And it got to the point where, and my epidural is still working at this point. Like I don't feel, like I can feel some of it, but for the most part, I didn't have much pain, which I'm so grateful for. And then they told me that, okay, she's crowning, like her head's crowning. Here she comes, here she comes, here she comes. And then I didn't feel like a pop, but I felt like a release of pressure. Like I could feel like it was pressure, 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 pressure. And then it relieved. And so I was like, okay, her head's out. I know it's out. And so he was like, okay, give me another really good push. Like give me another, when this contraction comes, another really good push. And so I was determined. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm so done. I've been doing this for 45 fucking hours. I'm so done. Like, I just want my baby here. Let's get this done. And so I like reared back and they pushed on my legs and I just bared down so hard and I could feel another little bit of pressure. And then I could see him like I opened my eyes for a second. I saw him just help facilitate her out. And then she was out. And I think he needed to like check her or something. And maybe he I don't know what they did, but it was maybe like 2 or 3 seconds before they put her on my chest. But he immediately put her on my chest. She was covered in the cheesy looking vernix. I didn't give a shit though. I was totally naked, completely fucking naked in this bed with all these people in the room. And I didn't care at all, which is crazy because that was like the one thing that I didn't want when I was planning my birth. I was like, I don't want anybody else in the room besides me, Connor, and Sarah. That's it. Like, I don't even care if the provider's there. I was like gung-ho on it. And now looking back, I'm just so glad that I had all that support with me and like everyone was there to make sure that the baby was okay and that I was okay. But yeah, she laid there on my chest for a minute and me and Connor he was right here just like I pictured it. And we were just crying and looking at her and looking at each other and just in awe of how amazing the whole experience was. And yeah, just in awe, like we did it. We finally did it. Like these last 10 months of pregnancy and the last 3 days of labor, like we did it. And it was beautiful. It was the most magical thing that has ever happened to me. And they were listening to her and taking her blood pressure and all this stuff. And they asked me like, can we take her and go weigh her? And I said, yes. And at that point, the doctor was like, okay, like we need to deliver the placenta. So he started like pushing on my uterus and that was quite a bit uncomfortable, but he was pushing and I could just feel like the blood and the amniotic fluid just like gushing out of me, which was wild. And then he was like, okay, I need you to give me a couple of pushes. And so these pushes weren't nearly as intense, but I gave a couple good pushes and I saw the placenta. It came out like it was like a steak, like a steak that was like folded in half. And he pulled it out and he showed me. And then he pulls Connor aside and he's looking at the placenta with him. And yeah, it was really, really wild. And they kind of wiped her off and cleaned her up and brought her over to me. And Connor got to cut the cord. So yeah, that was it. They turned off my epidural, they kept me on the Pitocin for a little bit longer to help contractions. we stayed at mom and baby for 2 hours, and then, or I'm sorry, we stayed in labor and delivery for 2 hours, and then we went up to mom and baby, and that's a whole other adventure that I'm gonna go get Connor for to talk to you about. But that was that's my birth story.